Evil Dead changed my life. I am in the horror business today because of Evil Dead. And it showed a new style of horror that I didn't know existed.
There was nothing like it. It just sat there as this kind of really realistic but slightly comedic. You didn't know if you were supposed to laugh, so you were a little bit on edge.
I loved, the Friday the 13th and all those movies. So, but when somebody said, this Evil Dead is kind of like a notch above, it was like, that's one we got to check out.
When I saw it alone at night, it's comedic, but I remember it did have a sense of evil. It was a scary movie. It was kind of evil. And I watched it alone, and I thought, wow, that's pretty good.
It was definitely something that we were not expecting. I mean, we never have seen anything with that much blood, with that much gore, with that much strange feeling, very, like done and dirty feeling.
In terms of bloodletting, I mean, this movie's got, more blood and guts than anything, just about any film that's ever been made.
I remember one of my friends saw it and asking, so how real did it look? How real was the gore? Oh, it looks so real, man. You got to go check it out. So I went and checked it out and, was pleasantly surprised.
I gotta tell you, I'm just amazed that this stuff's still kicking around. I mean, particularly now, everything's been released, there's so much product and so much stuff vying. And still these films, to this day make it in the top 5 of either scary or whatever, at any combination of them, Evil Dead, Army of Darkness, Evil Dead 2, whatever.
Horror really is about anticipation, and it's about, kind of slow moments where things, seemingly take forever. When you are dreading, where this is going.
My really favorite moment, at least the one that's really impressed me the most when I discovered the movie the first time, it's that swing outside on the porch. That swing that bounces against the wall non-stop.
Bunk, 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 bunk. And it's just this rhythmic, unsettling bunk, bunk.
And when he finds the key, the swing stops. And this is such a great moment. It's like really, really amazing filmmaking because it's established that whole spirit being there and waiting. And that swing bouncing is such an amazing sound design and visual. And that's one of my favorite moments.
Evil Dead woke me to the use of sound in films because I think he was right on the edge there at the time using, you know, there were voices, there were things that were, but there were a lot of, you know, to go with cameras racing down, which were essentially just cameras stuck on planks as far as I know. And just the use of sound in horror.
They showed a little clip from it at the Academy recently, talking about the sound work, and just, you know, every little squish and squiggle and squirt, you know, it's all there.
Great sound stuff. In fact, the film's almost as scary if you close your eyes.
During the 80s, it was the little movies like Evil Dead that were the scariest. You know, movies like Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and you know, they even the original Nightmare on Elm Street done as a very low-budget affair. And The Hills Have Eyes. You know, all these movies came out right around that same time.
That era was very important. It was kind of a golden age of horror because of the new market in video. So there's a context, there's an economic context and a technological context for why the 80s had lots of great horror movies. And that has to do with the fact that the video business was just taking off. This coincided in the international marketplace with this new way of financing pictures, independent pictures internationally. And that was you could pre-sell the pictures foreign. And the video part of it became bigger and bigger and bigger. And then comes the horror movies. And this was what, this was something that you could sell. And so for people who like horror movies like me, this was great So that's the context, is that there was a lot of independent pictures. But on the kind of horror fan level, I think probably the big one was probably Halloween, which kicked off the modern slasher era. And the slashers went all the way through the 80s.
That was, you know, the Friday the 13th movies, and then all the knockoffs of the Friday the 13th movies, and they all just became, to me, in my mind, kind of, I thought Halloween was great, and then kind of more and more kind of bland iterations on that theme, and to the point where the by numbers wrote of that were, okay, there's a group of sexy kids, and they're boning in the woods, and then there's a slasher and he wants them. But then when I found Evil Dead and the breath of fresh air that was Evil Dead, because it has certain conventions of the genre, in a way to almost lull you into it's like a beautiful setup to a joke, because you're like, oh, okay, I know this. You know, I've seen it before. It's okay, it's a group of kids, they're going out in the woods. There's something in the woods. I've seen that. And then it just goes so shitbird bananas that you're just like, whoa!
I mean, I would call it a splatter film, you know, is really what it is, you know, because it's not really like, you know, like Halloween or something where you've got some guy running around killing people. It's much more visceral, you know, what they, I guess, now call body horror, you know, having to do with, you know, exploding body parts, and which we did a considerable amount of in Reanimator as well. You know, our film came out a couple of years later in '85, and you know, after Evil Dead, I mean, it was like, you know, what can you do, you know, to top this? You know, how can you go beyond what they've done in that movie?
And then just the amount of blood, which, you know, I would say the only people in their horror careers who were brave enough to use that much blood, over the top amounts of blood. It was Sam, and then it was early Peter Jackson. And they were the only two who were like hip to the idea that you could add this level of fun, visceral fun. Like watching a horror movie doesn't have to be dour. It could be this rollicking, red-blooded, literally kind of roller coaster experience that, you know, that you see in so much of Sam's later work.
Evil Dead kind of falls into that place of independent filmmaking. I mean, it came out of nowhere. I mean, nobody wanted to distribute it when it first came out. So it pushed all these buttons and pushed the envelope on so many levels that these bigger studios would never attempt to do. And I think that's why it kind of carved its own kind of niche. It popularized in a lot of ways that indie do-it-yourself genre, and that's very inspiring. It really is very inspiring. But so I think it has that place in history of like, here's a group of guys that went out with little money and made this kind of success story, and really did it in a different way. Kind of didn't follow the typical rules that you saw of the films of that era, and you have to appreciate it for that.
There is a great game between Wes Craven and Sam Raimi that started in Evil Dead. Evil Dead, you have that Hills of Eyes rip-off poster, and it's kind of like, yeah, you think the Hills of Eyes was scary, this is gonna be very scary. And then in Nightmare on Elm Street, one of the characters falling asleep watching Evil Dead on TV. It's like, oh, that was boring. And then in Evil Dead 2, you have the Freddy Krueger claw hanging in the cellar of Evil Dead 2. And I was like really amazed by that kind of back and forth between the three movie, and I was trying to find something to do in the Hills of Ice remake as an homage to that. And, you know, I mean, it was difficult to get something like that, but I think it was a very interesting moment to add. And it's a good back and forth into that time frame where like everyone was fighting to get the most scary movie ever made.
Sam read up on everything, in fact, and I think I remember him doing quite a bit of research and talking about the Book of the Dead, the Egyptian Book of the Dead, and in one of his classes at Michigan State University.
Actually, in some ways, it's very Lovecraftian. You know, the whole Book of the Dead, I think, was the original title of the movie, and you know, that book is the Necronomicon, which is, you know, figures into a lot of Lovecraft stories, and it even has the you know, the cover that's made out of human skin, you know, the way that Lovecraft describes the Necronomicon.
Really, Tom Sullivan, the guy who created the special makeup effects for First Evil Dead, he was the Lovecraftian guy. And his illustrations to this day, he's such a talent.
We have these horrific occult drawings, which, you know, again, back to the age of 13, I'm like, eyeballs growing out of the ground, but just unnerve you.
It wasn't until I was like well versed in Evil Dead and Evil Dead 2 that someone said to me, well, you know, like he took that from Lovecraft. I was like, really? I should read Lovecraft. And then I was reading Lovecraft. I'm like, this isn't nearly as bloody or cool as Evil Dead, you know. But you know, he was the pioneer of it.
You know, the idea that there are all of these forces that are out there that are, you know, that consider humans to be very, very insignificant and very easy prey, as we said in From Beyond. And you're just waiting for the opportunity to come back into our world. And that, you know, the Necronomicon is the key, you know, to opening, you know, the door to letting them back in.
I think what makes Lovecraft important, in my mind, is that he created a horror without the traditional Western religion. In Evil Dead, I don't see anybody pulling up a cross to stop something. I don't think it would help. And the evil is real, and there's no morals to it. Doesn't matter if they were good, bad, in between. It doesn't matter if you sacrificed yourself for the girlfriend or were a coward. Everybody gets the same, you know. And I don't think there's any particular reason why Bruce Campbell survives, except that he was the most fun actor to look at.
I mean, that's sort of Lovecraft's point often, is that, you know, if man understood the truth, he would either commit suicide or go mad. I mean, there's no middle ground there. And I think that is the result. That's where Evil Dead kind of leaves you, you know, with this kind of insanity. You know, the main character, even though he goes on in 2 more movies, yeah, he's like a different guy than he is at the beginning of the film.
There is uh, there is an attraction for the woods. It's true for like a long time in all movie, and it's true it's a very kind of scary place. And the reason I think is because when you're in the middle of the woods, even more by night, you have the feeling by being surrounded by people, but they are not people; they are trees. But they still have some kind of organic life in them, feeling that they can be alive and they can attack you, which is one of the best thing in Evil Dead. Is like that forest gets alive and start attacking, and this is one of the most creative thing. And this is like the best way of putting a fear into something that we all have.
I think it goes back to, fairy tales, the Little Red Riding Hood. The woods is a dangerous place. And I think the woods kind of symbolizes sort of the subconscious. It's the twisted sort of dark side of the personality. And it's very Freudian.
We're scared of things in the dark. When you're at home and you hear a rustling in the bushes outside your house in the middle of suburbia, in whatever city you're living in, there's something reptilian in your brain that goes, oh. I think what you're really scared of is that used to happen to your ancestors, and then something came out of the woods and ate them. There's kind of a savagery to nature, and you're out in the middle of all that, and that bad things can happen out there, and you can't get to help, and no one could find you, and all of those things that were as true a couple thousand years ago that they are today. So I think there's just something in our bones that makes that scary.
It's all about isolation. It's all about not being in control, and something out there that you don't quite understand how to defend yourself against. And that's, that would cause fear in anybody. But, you couple that with a supernatural component. Now you don't even have a logical construct to work from. Anything's possible.
And even the woods are dangerous. You can get raped by a tree or something in this movie.
The forest rape scene, that's hardcore, and it's like, it's so hardcore. You have to be like a really young, reckless filmmaker to do that rape scene.
This is for me one of the most extreme scenes of the movie, and maybe one of the most extreme scenes that Sam Raimi ever made. I don't see anything that extreme that he made after that.
And like, she's getting attacked by trees, oh my God! And then you're like, wait a minute, those trees are undressing her. And then like, once you hit that moment, and you're like, where am I going as a viewer? And then you're like, those trees are spreading her legs apart.
I wonder how they did that, because it looks so real, even if it's like kind of stop motion and stuff. It looks so well made, and you are really in the moment and you feel for her. I mean, this movie and The Entity, for me, are like raising a level of strange imagery that not other movie managed to get.
And that's a crazy moment, because you're just like, but it's such a treat as a viewer to be in the hands of a daring and reckless filmmaker. Because so many movies you watch, there's parameters that they're not going to cross because of like public good taste. Like, I know they're not going to take me there. So I know there's only a level of shock I can reach. But the excitement that comes from that, because you're just like, what's he going to do next? What's he going to do? And it's a delicious tension as a viewer, and very few movies have it, but Evil Dead does.
I think with Evil Dead, you certainly get a sense of a presence in the woods, and whether it's manipulating the trees and the vines, or you're kind of in the head of the demon or whatever it may be, flying through the woods, or you see it manifesting itself in Ash's friends and even Ash himself later on. You never really see the spirit itself or the demon itself.
It's the creature, the unseen entity. I mean, that's been used in movies, but not quite that way. Not quite with such abandon and with no concern for explaining to you the rules. Because if you have rules, at least you can say, gee, if I just don't do this, or I don't go there, or I behave, we can fight it. I don't see how you fight it.
A rule in horror, and it was born out of low-budget filmmaking, but turned out to be true even when it's an expensive movie, is like the less you see, the better it is. And what you don't see is always so much scarier and cooler and more interesting than what you do see.
So it's all about the execution of the manifestations. It's all about the execution of what are the end result of these spirits or demons, and then allowing that little bit of ambiguity to kind of dance around in the audience's head and let that do the work for you. And they do it to great effect in this one.
I guess it would be about 1983. I'm not sure whether that's exactly the case. And I was in England, and I saw a pirated VHS, a video home system tape of it. And the thing was, at that time, there were these things called video nasties, and there was this real kind of McCarthy-esque crackdown on horror movies that was going on in England. So you couldn't see horror movies. You couldn't see certain horror movies. The government at the time had decided that horror movies were the reason for all kinds of horrible things that were happening in society. So the term video nasty was one, if you're British, that was very common at the time. So the only way to see things like The Evil Dead and various films, and it wasn't just horror, there was all kinds of weird other things that went into it, was to get yourself a pirated copy. And so me and a few of my mates, we all got together and we all got The Evil Dead, which we thought was great. You know, we'd all seen like Faces of Death and all stuff like that as well, which was really, we shouldn't have seen. But so on comes the film, and there's like John Waters trailers and weird stuff that you just like, the hell is this? And then The Evil Dead comes on. And so at the age of 13, there's no real context for this. And, you know, in retrospect, there's a whole area of things that affected me as a filmmaker. But at the time, I'm 13. I know nothing about film. I'm sitting down in a suburban area, well, in the woods, basically, in northern England. And I've got a bicycle home on my own through the woods. And it's just terrifying. I had the living pants scared off me. I remember it's, you know, the point that terror hit was, you know, there was the whole tree rape thing, which became a subject of many controversies. I believe it was cut out of various versions, but we had the uncut version, so we had all that, and the lady comes back, and they go to the bridge, and everything comes back. And then, you know, I remember the exact moment. It's when the lady turns to the window and she goes, "Queen of Spades, Four of Hearts, Eight of Clubs," and then turns around and you're like, "Ah!" And the whole room went, "Ah! Ah! Ah!" And then it was just like, from that point onwards, we were just all like, "Ah!" all the way through it, because we were 13. And then, you know, and we'd shed our pants.
I do think there's a sort of manic energy that happens toward the end when they're all in the room and the ghouls are in the midair. Even at that midnight show, when that pencil goes in the ankle, people just lose it. And I've seen that scene a bunch of times. You look at it, it's, you know, it's a little, the ankle's a little funky. You can kind of, but it's a great moment. And I think it's because everybody's like had pencils, jab them, and, you know, there's a reality to that as opposed to getting a pitchfork to the head or, you know, having your head taken off with a shovel. That's doesn't happen, but well, it may happen, but a pencil, that's just real, you know. It looks painful, and it's also, it doesn't just go in, they wind it around a little bit in there. So it's, you know, I guess it's like everybody stepped on a nail or something, and you know that feeling when you first do it, and you go, that's gonna hurt. And so it's that sort of, that's gonna hurt. It's not even the pain of the moment, it's, boy, that's gonna hurt later. Especially when you wind it around in there.
I helped out in all kinds of ways. I think the fake Shemp credit was kind of an overall credit. I was supposed to play Scotty. Something went haywire along the way. I couldn't make the commitment. Actually, I couldn't do it. I couldn't just say, okay, let's go down to Tennessee and everything. But I still kind of kicked myself. I wish I could have been more involved and more helpful. But what an incredible experience. I mean, in some ways, I kind of like, sorry I missed the war. I came out, I helped out on a lot of the reshoots that Sam and Rob and Bruce did for Evil Dead, and I blew blood, and I blew oatmeal out Scotty's sleeve when he's decomposing at the climax of Evil Dead and all this stuff. And I helped out here, there, and everywhere, so it was more like, as opposed to me doubling for someone per se, it was more just like a credit, like, oh, okay. I mean, at least that's my perspective of it. Because wasn't really, I mean, in the truest term of a fake Shemp, that's when you get a double to do somebody else. But I supplied all the beef parts too for the end, because I worked in a grocery store at the time. And unfortunately, nobody thought to refrigerate those things. Oh my gosh. I worked on I worked on more of that film than I thought.
the mighty Bruce. I refer to him as the mighty Bruce Campbell, with the mightiest of chins. And he just looks really scared. He really does look scared in Evil Dead. And in 2, you know, he's become, you know, Ash completely.
Well, you know what I always loved about all 3 movies, and about the Ash character especially, is he is a jerk. He is not your classic romantic hero movie lead. He's in the slightest. He's a bit of a coward, more than a bit in some of the later movies. That, I think, is the charm of it. He feels like a real guy, a guy that worked at S-Mart and ended up in this horrific situation, just kind of pissed off about it. Like, he wanted to go get laid with his girlfriend, and instead he's caught up with these demons, and he just faces these challenges. So sort of, you know, there's no like there's no retrospection. There's no like stops to go like, I wonder why they're after me. It's sort of like he just goes for it.
Bruce Campbell or Ash, he's like, how much crap is this guy gonna go through, man? It's just, and then you watch 2, and then, you know, Army of Darkness, like, man, this guy is just, I mean, if anyone epitomizes like the Energizer Bunny of horror characters, it's this dude.
You know, that's the role of really sort of a great character you've created, is you just can't imagine anybody else in it. You know, it's like when they talk about Casablanca and they say, well, Ronald Reagan was supposed to play that part at first. Well, that would have been a real different movie. I can't imagine who could have. I don't know who had those skills. The sort of comedy. First of all, the willingness to go for it, but the sort of comic / athletic / you know, rugged good looks. All that kind of combination. I don't know who else could have done it. So I think Bruce is the Evil Dead is Bruce. I mean, if they make more Evil Deads, I sure hope Bruce is part of them.
The character, you know, of Ash, I mean, he is sort of the ultimate kind of horror movie hero. You know, he really is. And, you know, everyone, when they watch a movie, they want to have a character that they can become, that they can be. And I think in Evil Dead, it's, you know, Bruce Campbell embodies. We all want to be as cool as Bruce Campbell is, and as funny.
You can't talk about Bruce Campbell without mentioning the chin. You know, the chin. I think, you know, I mean, Bruce has got to be thankful for that chin. That chin has spawned many a role for him, and without it, you got to think about where he would have been without the chin. You know, it's a weird thing. How chins. It's probably one of the only careers where the chin has really, you know, led the actor, quite literally, led the actor.
I think one of the things that's scariest in horror movies is madness. And and Evil Dead, I think, reaches that point when the girlfriend is mad. When you forget the special effects that she really changes, that's pretty creepy. But the idea that someone close to you has become, possessed, that's madness. That they've become a demon, that's madness, however you want to define it. Laughter is madness. If we think of going into the insane asylum, people are laughing.
Sam Raimi is really one of the first that brought that feeling, that distance, create fun in the nightmare, but without becoming a spoof or becoming something that not real and you don't believe. Like being justified in the story, like a demon losing it and start singing and being crazy. It's funny and it's very scary at the same time, and that's what I really love in Evil Dead.
You'll never find an audience that wants to laugh more than a horror movie audience, and the reason is that laughter is the antidote to fear, and so when you're laughing, you're able to blow away the tension. And a good horror movie kind of gives you those moments where the laughter is okay, it's not going to destroy the movie, and then cranks it up again, builds up the tension, which is what Evil Dead does over and over again.
It's suspense, it's setup, payoff. And you know what I mean? It's like, oh my goodness, she's taking a shower in Psycho and there's a shadow and you're like, pay attention, no, don't wash her face, look at the... And it's a suspense, and then the shower curtain comes back, the knife comes up, she gets stabbed. That's the setup and payoff. And the same, I think, goes with, whatever joke you're telling, it's like, whatever, my father knew the exact day he was going to die. Yes, the judge told him. You're like, oh. And that's part of misdirection and all that kind of stuff. But I mean, and Sam is a master of that.
So I think people kind of sense that structurally you can have the same and you're kind of feeling the same thing. It's both are in the business of surprise.
Horror and comedy, we know it. It's in our DNA because we grew up watching cartoons. We grew up watching Wile E. Coyote smack into a tree, and there's nothing funnier than that kind of violence. And as culturally, evil as that may be, it's damn funny. There's a hilarity in violence that's somewhere based in our reptilian coil that we just find really funny, I think, unless it's just me.
Comedy in its own way kind of preys on misfortune. The people falling and stumbling and slapstick is all people having a bad day. So if you can make it very funny very quickly if you know how to do it. And I think you have to have an innate sense of humor about those sorts of things to make that work. And obviously these guys did.
This is something that I think Evil Dead, in its absolutely fun, completely, it seems like some of it is purely stream of consciousness type of craziness, using every effect, I guess, that Sam Raimi could use. He just did whatever he felt like doing. There was such a sense of freedom to the whole movie. But at one point, what is scary about it is seeing your friends become somebody else and become able to mutilate you or themselves. Or I think that's a kind of a laughter, a hysterical laughter in itself.
You know, I read one of the things that I think was interesting was that he uses, has these things bleeding, sort of this milky substance. And he thought that that would somehow alleviate the problem of getting an R rating on the film. But unfortunately, people looked at it and went, whoa, this is even more disgusting than blood. And, he ended up releasing it unrated, which, is a wonderful thing. When you see a movie coming out that's unrated, you know that they're going to be delivering the goods.
I'll tell you one thing that Sam did that to me was like a revelation was, and it's so simple, but it made such a difference, is like the fact that you could punch a demon in the face. I mean, think about that for a minute. Like in Rosemary's Baby, like no one's punching demons in the face. Like in The Exorcist, there's a lot of like, oh, and you're throwing holy water and you got crosses out and you're chanting, but no one walks up to her and just starts punching her in the face, right? No one starts punching Reagan in the face.
In some ways, it borrows a bit from The Exorcist. The idea of this, innocent little girl transforming into this demon, and changing physically. I think Sam took that idea and just really amplified it, went even further. I mean, the makeups in this movie are wonderful too, very extreme, very cartoony, almost Japanese in a way. They have this feeling of almost like kabuki or something. I mean, everything, and the way that the creatures behave. very inhuman, very larger than life.
Yes, there's the threat of the outside, but in Evil Dead, the threat of the outside becomes the thing inside, because it's your girlfriend who becomes a demon. So she's your girlfriend one minute, and then she's this monster who wants to kill you the next.
It's asking a question because it's a question that everyone can rely on. Like, you know, like if my girlfriend turned into a zombie, what am I gonna do? Am I going to, like, you know, dismember her, or am I going to just run away from her and try to wait that she get back, or just sacrifice myself and die with her and become a zombie as well? So it's a very interesting kind of, I mean, at least for the genre people to have, and the movie was raising it in a very fun way, because you understand it's problematic. You understand that, you know, it's hard for him to cross the line and start killing his friend, you know, one by one.
Especially in Ash's story, because every so often she reverts to her true girlfriend, you know, as a way to like pray at his sympathy for her, and he can't quite kill her, or he ties her to that table and he's gonna chop her up with the chainsaw, but he can't do it because she's got the necklace and he's got to bury her. Terrible mistake, Ash, don't bury her, just dismember her. And like, but there is like and maybe it's not even so subtextual, maybe it's right there. There's this beautifully manic insanity in Bruce Campbell's performance after he like decapitates his girlfriend with the shovel, which is, you know, probably my single favorite scene. Like she comes at him and he gets that shovel, and just the way it was all shot, and the way the camera follows the shovel, and he starts to lose his mind because he's going native, because he's like, I just killed, you know, what's going through his head is, I just killed my girlfriend. I just chopped up my girlfriend. Like, even if we get out of this, there's dismembered bodies of my friends and my girlfriend littering the floor of this cabin where I am. And like I'm cooked whether I get out of this or not. From a directorial standpoint, it's truly great. And I used to get, I went to a film school and I was surrounded by all these pretentious punks who I wanted to punch in the face all the time. And I would get into like arguments because I was like, screw you and all your foreign cinema. Like, I don't give a crap. Like, the best directed movies are Evil Dead and Evil Dead 2. From a pure level of directing, those are the movies.
I really, really like understand that somehow Evil Dead was the Citizen Kane of the horror. That was the I will not even say the Citizen Kane, the more like the touch of evil, the kind of baroque Orson Welles style made with done and dirty, no money, and being creative, and it's so rich, the way he creates those camera move in the woods, and you see that there is someone very, very smart behind this movie, and someone that's really, have a vision of the genre that no one else has.
Sam Raimi brought a visual style to that movie that it just wasn't, it just felt new and fresh. You just hadn't seen it that much, and especially in horror movies, which even then were sort of kind of stately and they were shot like normal movies. This felt like somebody was really taking a rocket to it and really like giving it some propulsive energy and moving that camera around in ways we really hadn't seen before.
I think one of the things about the movie that is just really hard to duplicate is it's just packed with this youthful energy. This is a young Sam Raimi, who's like a teenager almost making this movie, and it has that kind of energy, this of youth, and it creates this sense of excitement and terror in the audience. I mean, the thing about an audience when you're watching Evil Dead is everybody is like, almost levitating from their seats, because it's just so insane.
I think he just was a natural talent at figuring out how to move the camera and how to make that work. I'm sure they didn't have unlimited funds to just shoot everything 1,000 times. But he knew where to place a camera. He intuitively knew how to set those shots up to get the best effect. So, I mean, the look of it really is unique. I think he upped the ante quite a bit in Evil Dead 2 and with some of his later films.
There's still a Sam Raimi in everything he does. I mean, it's just you can't escape your own kind of sensibilities and personalities in the work you do.
The Spider-Man movies are amazing because, and it's that energy, you just know that's, Sam bringing that sort of same dynamic on a, uber scale.
I think Sam has this great desire to make these amazing spectacles, and he loves fun. I think we have great things to see from Sam Raimi, and if this is your first Sam Raimi movie, you just got to see some more. I think Evil Dead as a filmmaker, it's such a filmmaker's piece. It's such a director's piece. It's so full of amazing shots, yet at the same time, none of those shots compromise the story, and the story works so well that it's just a fantastic and fun introduction to film, you know, and horror working together perfectly.
Evil Dead certainly inspired me and inspired a generation of filmmakers. As somebody who works in and loves genre, I owe such a debt of credit and have so much respect for Sam, Rob, Bruce, the Evil Dead movies, because they just showed me that a new way of doing it was possible. And they attacked it with such a daring gusto and sense of fun and sense of enjoyment that you could make horror movies fun, and that they could be thrill rides, and that they could be just exciting and visceral and playful and funny and weird and quirky and strange and gory and bloody, and that it could be all of the above.
Evil Dead stays with you forever. It is a movie that is so unique, and the style of it is so, you know, I mean, there's nothing like it. And I think it did kind of set the bar for a lot of other filmmakers. People like, you know, Peter Jackson, when he did Brain Dead, I think was echoing Evil Dead to a large degree.
Evil Dead is like definitely like a huge impact, but also allowed like a lot of young filmmakers to be able to do low budget movie and being very creative, like not only psychological or like whatever, but go with the blood and the homemade effect. And I think Evil Dead is the reason why Peter Jackson exists, and you know, thank God Peter Jackson exists. So I mean, it's really like, you know, it's a good cycle where like Sam Raimi feeds Peter Jackson, they feed me and so many other people, and we're feeding each other, and we keep the genre alive, and we try to be, you know, creative and create as much as we can new way of scaring the audience.
I will always have a soft spot for films that are done on that are more motivated by passion and more motivated by innovation and resourcefulness than big budget and trying to appeal to some marketing segment of society. And that is what this is all about. I mean, you see a film there, and in every frame of it is a bunch of filmmakers that are having a great time and loving what they're doing. And it is transcendent throughout the whole film. And that's what makes something like that such a joy to watch. Even later on, you know, year after year, it holds up because you're looking at a film that this is, if anything, driven by pure passion.
What's cool about the franchise is each film is different in its own way, as I guess Three Kids might be different, but it has a nice cohesion. And you see where the first one's pretty deadly serious with some weird, bizarro scenes in it. And then the second one's getting a little wacky, but still kind of grounded. And then the third one is kind of this Ray Harryhausen, Sam Raimi-ish kind of incredible fantasy, which is really, really cool. And gosh almighty, will there be a fourth one? That's what everybody asks, right?